Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the second podcast. You guys know the drill. We're gonna answer a bunch of questions you guys sent in. With me, I have Joshua Nademan. Josh,
What's up, guys?
hey, that's a nice "what's up" there.
Yeah.
What's up, guys? Here for me too. Today we have a bunch of questions. Josh, you ready to answer them?
I am.
right,
Hopefully in short form, but the reality is that there's going to be a long one and a short one probably each time. So you'll get the edited together short versions, and then you can really dive deep on the longer podcast if you want.
Alrighty, guys, let's get to it. Beginning with Tunetic. Tunetic is his username, I think. He asks, "How do you program push-ups and pull-ups for someone who used to be proficient in doing them, but has completely neglected doing them the past few years?"
I think that really is saying, how do you program for a beginner? And that's what you do. Because what we do is we say, all right, your body used to have a capacity, so you're going to make gains a lot faster than a real beginner. Because as fast as newbie gains are, old strength gains are even faster. Because what happens is that you basically have all the command and control centers, aka myonuclei, that are responsible for maintaining your muscle mass. But they have a lot less real estate to cover. So instead of already being kind of maxed out and needing to install new command and control centers, they can just re-expand out. They can just say, well, I'm only covering like a quarter of the real estate that I can. So I'm just going to get back to work. I'm going to build this stuff back up, and it's a lot faster. So you don't need to worry about trying to, artificially limit your progress. Typically, the way that you approach a layoff is you say, how long have I been out? And for each week that you've been out, you will reduce the intensity and the volume by about 5%. And so the first thing that I would do is start off with really low intensity and build back into the volume that you are used to, right? That may take 6-8 weeks. That's fine. That's a normal reintroduction to moderating damage. That's really what those first 6 to 8 weeks are all about, is your body figuring out how to not just get shredded, right? And I don't mean like lean. I mean like literally unnecessary and dangerous amounts of muscle damage. So once it's done that, then you're going to just kind of slowly increase your intensity based on what you're capable of. And so you're really going to run this very similar programming to anybody else. You're just going to notice that you get stronger faster. The only thing that I would say is that if you do low leverage stuff, that you take that slower. And it'll still be most likely faster than other people, but you are going to need to just give your body the time to ease back in so that you don't get unnecessary tendinopathies. That's really it. I mean, it's very similar to a typical work-in and typical programming after that. It's just going to progress faster.
Yeah, makes sense.
There's nothing special.
It's basically what I've been doing. It's what I did wrong when I had the tendonitis thing. So
Yeah. And that's the other thing
this is how you to prevent it.
Yeah, we had to talk about this. He mentioned it a little bit in the last podcast, but that 5% feature to correct programming for reintroduction of volume is very important. And that's especially true when it comes to very high shear force activities. And
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and so what we mean is that like it's a little more of a complicated biomechanical discussion, but the end result is that like you can easily, if you hold your arm out like this, palm up, and hold like a 10-pound weight, you could easily be producing as much force in your bicep as you do with like a 40-pound curl at 90 degrees with your arm down by your side and in the bicep. And so there's forces increase very, very quickly there. And it's also a position that your body is not used to supporting forces in, especially in that particular attachment site, right? So you have to let that adapt, and that takes a long time. Yeah. It's kind of like saying, I want to bench twice my body weight. Well, everybody's going to say, yeah, this is probably going to take a little while, huh? Maybe I should just be systematic about it. And you want to think about these low leverage positions the same way.
Okay. Thank you for that answer. I hope we answer your question, Tunatic. Moving on to the next question from Alexander Egebak. Sorry for the mispronunciation. I think I can pronounce this one because he's Danish, right?
I think he's in
Alexander
Norway.
Egebak? Norway. Oh, yeah, of course.
He's in the area.
Then I'm not gonna try. Moving on to his question. He asks, what are your preferences for alternative exercise selection if someone is unable to perform weighted push-ups? Good question.
Yeah.
And he mentions bench press, dips, tuck planche push-ups. Like, which one, bro?
Well, I think that it's a combination of what you can do, what you have available, and what you like. So when I say what you can do, it's what can you do safely and progress without hurting yourself. For most people,
Isn't it important to basically also look at why are you doing weighted push-ups? Like, what's the goal of the weighted push-ups?
Yeah, it is.
And how can we... So what's the goal? Why would someone even do weighted push-ups?
So the goal with the weighted push-ups is that you have a very stable, reliable position that's hard to screw up, and you're able to produce a lot of force with the shoulder musculature without putting yourself at risk of injuries, really. There's always a risk with everything, but it's a lot harder to screw up a regular push-up that has extra weight than it is to screw up a pseudo planche push-up that does not have extra weight, because it's a lot more stable. There's basically no balance involved at all, and you are in fairly high leverage position. So obviously it's not going to put the same elbow stress on, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Right? A lot of people get this backwards. Like, as you move in, you have to be very careful about certain vulnerable areas, and you don't want your exercises to overlap completely, because then you're doing double, triple work for all the areas. And when that happens, and the elbow flexors and forearms, especially when it's in long muscle lengths under high tension, you run a very high risk for injury. So you have to be strategic about which exercises you pick.
This is
if you don't want to get hurt.
I had a discussion with that back in the old days with Sebastian. We were doing lateral dell raises, and he insisted on keeping the arms locked.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And it's because I used to be a bodyweight purist who always kept his elbows locked whenever he could.
Right, yeah.
And I used to do the same thing, the old days. But once you hear the explanation Josh just gave, that's why you don't do that. If you're smart about it, if you're smart about your training, and you see where you put your volume in certain things, you realize it's not a good idea to always lock your arms.
Right.
You got to look at the purpose of your exercise. Why am I doing weighted push-ups today? It's because I want a bigger muscles for et cetera, et cetera. You always need to go back to why am I doing this particular exercise?
Right.
It also comes, even when you're form checking, when someone's knee is bent during a push-up, that's not the most important thing at that moment.
Right.
Okay? He's not trying to look good doing a push-up.
Right.
Okay? We're not judging his form like for gymnastics.
Right.
No one's doing gymnastics, push-ups, whatever. You know what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So always look at the purpose.
Exactly.
A planche could be very different in a certain context than during another context. So always look at the context of the exercise. Ask your athlete why are you doing this exercise, and then do your form check.
Exactly.
So just something really in between.
And
but going back
there's
to
even more to it than that. So when you mentioned the shoulder raises, right? In addition to avoiding injuries, there's another reason. When you create arm bends, you create rotational force through the shoulder as well. So now you're involving the external rotators, which people are fairly well aware benefit from a little bit of work, right? So when you bend your arms at like 30, 60, 90 degrees and then do the shoulder raise, now it is a totally different challenge. And that's a great way to kind of hit things and without spending way too much time, right? And that's one of those things that we'll be getting into on our training guides, and that we obviously handle in the coaching sessions and during consults. So
But I want to go back to the question though. So I sometimes I'm in the gym and I don't have anyone to put weights on my back.
Right.
And I always wonder what exercise could I do instead of these weighted push-ups.
Anything that works those muscle groups, man. I mean, to me, there's no difference between using a machine. Like I'm fine with somebody getting on a hammer strength. I'm fine with them getting on a Nautilus plate loader. I don't care. I want you to do the work, and that's what matters. You know, the muscles grow because of the work. If you are still practicing your planches and your planche push-ups a little bit and blah, 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 because they're important to you, that's going to be what maintains your skills. And the work for the muscles is going to be what allows you to safely build extra strength so that you can do more later. It's about putting money in the bank. You know what I mean? It's not just a rotating balance where you try and, you know, I don't even know, like, spend the same thing that you earn. It doesn't make sense. You need to build up savings so you can draw on them later. And it's very similar. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well,
and that doesn't mean that it doesn't mean you don't do specific stuff. It just means, like you said, it may not be where the majority of your volume is right now because it may not be the best way to maximize certain deficiencies you have.
Yeah. Makes sense. I think we covered that question pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Alexander, for your question. Moving on to Mitchell Howley. He says that he's glad that we are finally launching the website. We're also glad.
Yeah.
And he asks, what are your thoughts on how to best structure double sessions or multiple sessions during one day? And he mentions that skill work and lower mobility work in the early afternoon tends to energize him for upper body strength work in the evening.
Mm-hmm.
Which is a very logical way to do it.
The biggest thing that I would say is your first workout should not fatigue you. If you live by that rule, you can't screw up too bad.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? So
makes sense.
So that means, like, could be power training, it could be agility training, it could be flexibility training, it could be movement training, which means, again, nothing without context. But the bottom line is that if you practice these things, they should not tire you out. That's not the purpose of those sessions. When you do skill work, which is what all those fall under, you should not be tired at the end. Right? That's for strength training, and you don't want to do skill work after you are tired from strength training, because that's primarily non-recoverable fatigue, so your skill practice will be unavoidably impacted, whereas the reverse is not true.
That's a quick answer, which is very rare.
I know. I did good.
It.
I don't know what happened.
Let's stop now. Let's move on before we ruin this.
This one's going on like a gold USB drive, like in a museum.
Mitchell,
the moment
thank you for your
Naderman will
question.
never achieve again.
No, let's hope we can keep doing this so we can cover more questions. Next question from Maximiliano Santiago.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I think I did pretty well there. He asks, as someone who needs to lose a lot of weight, 20 pounds, and is still a beginner, technically back in the gym after a multi-year break, how should I approach training in the first month of training so as to avoid overdoing it or unnecessarily stop myself from increasing intensity or volume?
Yeah, so again,
Let's just say, sort of similar to the last question.
It is. You're going to start off with a set intensity until you achieve the volume that you think is best for you. And once you have done that, you're going to then slowly start increasing your intensity as you feel necessary. That's really it. I mean,
is this another short question?
Maybe it is. Maybe it is. We have our preferred guides in terms of figuring out what the pacing should be. Yeah. But that, like I said before, that after a layoff, typically you're going to be looking at something like 5% volume per week. If you're starting from 0, then just take 5% of your full volume and just have a short first session. You'd be surprised at how easy that is. It only, some people will say, oh man, that means it'll take, 5 months to come all the way back to what I was doing several years ago. It's like, well, that's not bad, is it? It took you 5 months to achieve what previously took years of work. Now, if you weren't that strong, it's obviously not going to take that long. But if you were a beast and you get back to that in less than a year, then without getting hurt, that's pretty amazing. So, It's all about
Yeah.
context. It's what you just have to use a little bit of your own common sense, which may be difficult, and you may have the common sense, but you may not know enough. So just consult us or get a different competent coach. I don't really care who you go to as long as you get people who know what they're doing.
Yes, sir.
That's really it, and just don't do too much too fast. Slower is always preferable to faster because you're not going to get hurt.
Moving on to the next question from Jacob Kowalski. Or maybe Jakub. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe in tuck front lever rows? They are problematic when it comes to range of motion and positioning of the body. You can have more or less range of motion each session or more or less tuck. Would you rather use some type of barbell row or maybe progress the body lean on the bodyweight arc rows?
So we actually have an exercise that we're going to be teaching everybody that makes front lever absurdly easy to perform correctly and build strength in much faster than you're used to. So we'll be showing that. That's going to be my answer to that. There is a right way to go about this. It is something that you can do literally anywhere that has a bar, and we'll be teaching you how to do it so that you get the results you want each and every time. There's no better answer than that because there's no better exercise than what we're going to show you. And that's a big
you're
statement.
Teasing us.
That's a big statement. But here's the thing.
I know.
The second that you do it, you're going to be like, why didn't I think of this? I can't believe it. This is brilliant. Because that's what I did. That's
big words, man.
You got to realize that years ago when I did all the front lever stuff, that I was doing 10 reps, 12 reps of 275-pound bent over rows with my back almost parallel to the ground. I mean, they were legit rows. I had 12 to 15 rep, 120-pound pull-ups, blah, blah, blah. And so I was already so strong that, and I had just for whatever reason had the right patterns to where I was able to do these things pretty quickly. But then as I've been coming back, I didn't have that strength anymore. And so kind of out of necessity with my mind working, eventually a couple of months ago, we came up with something. There was something that I asked Olaf to do about a year and a half ago, but I hadn't fully refined it. And so I just kind of ran with that and said, geez, I wonder what happens if I make this modification. And all of a sudden I was like, holy crap. It's impossible to screw up now. So that's what we're going to be giving everybody. Yeah.
Okay, you're teasing way too much now. Let's move on. People are like, well, give it to us now.
We will. It's coming.
We will. You get it. You'll get it real soon. Moving on to the next question from Matthew Mulvey. He had a bunch of questions, but the one that I want to discuss, it's a very important one. He's asking, how is Yachts back?
What does that mean?
I kind of want to take off my shirt and show my back.
I don't even know what that means.
I don't know what it means either, but I think he thinks that I got injured in my back, but I'm just going to quickly go through my injuries. I injured my wrists a lot because I was young, I did not warm up, and I planched. So, always warm up before you do a planche. Moving on. I have had tendonitis on both my elbows, brachioradialis, which I also fixed. And they're sore again years later, but that's a whole different story. We kind of discussed that in the last podcast. Now I have had shoulder issues, which is something that is chronic, and I have to keep on, visit it again and fix it. But it's going really well right now. And I have had, let's see, any other injuries? Josh, any injuries I had? I had some knee issues, but yeah, it's all right.
You've had a couple of moments to where you went in and you had some lower back spasms.
Oh yeah, lower back issue. It's still an issue. I need to work on that. You have so many things you got to work on. One thing, guys, the stronger you get,
one of the things that
bigger
doesn't do, by the way, is he doesn't really do a whole lot of back extensions. And
I do now.
Yeah, you do now.
I do
finally.
I do now. It's just it's hard. You forget about it.
I just want to point that out.
So yeah, it's good.
They're undervalued.
So it's one of the things. The stronger you get, the more training years you have, the bigger the amount of prehab becomes, in order to still get strong. So if you still want to keep strong, you're gonna have to do more prehab.
I would
And
say
that's
that's.
Is it
Yeah, I would say
think
that
it's
that's
it's a
a
fact.
half truth.
A half truth?
Yeah,
Fight
I
me.
do.
Let's talk about this. Let's talk about this.
I think that it depends on your injury history heavily. It also
Okay,
depends.
that makes sense.
It also depends on how old you are.
I mean, you're gonna get older, always.
When you start getting past your early to mid 20s, you are going to find, and this is pretty universal across all athletes, is that between the ages of 25 and 35, for me, I didn't really notice until I got into like 27 to 29 that things were just a little bit different. Up until that point, I didn't change anything, and I had no problems. And then from there to now, because I'll be 37 in a couple of weeks, I definitely noticed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I know, right?
Holy shit, dude.
I noticed that I did require a little bit more warm up. It wasn't a whole lot. I've never personally required a whole lot, but it benefited me more. And the funny thing is that research, there's not a ton of it, but the research that's out there suggests a very similar age-related change, where younger athletes don't seem to benefit all that much from warm up in terms of injury. You always benefit in terms of reminding your body of what you're about to ask it to do. But that's not the same thing as injury reduction. And you can make this argument, and people will, it's going to happen. I'm not going to engage on that, because it's obviously true that if you're retarded and you are moving badly, and then you say, you know what, I'm going to add more weight to bad movement, then sure, you can get hurt. But I don't think it's a full truth. It's going to be different from person to person. And I think that the biggest thing is it's not so much about prehab, it's more that you're going to have more things that you're practicing. So you're going to have more warm-up to do.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Because you can't just go from like Maltese to Victorian. Like you still need to warm up because it's a totally different movement.
Yeah.
And so you need to remind your body of what that is and go through that. And so as you get builder, it's kind of like with tumblers. You know, when I used to sit and shadow, Coach Sommer back when he was still a competitive coach. And so one of the things that I thought was fascinating and extremely smart was when somebody, he always made them go through a particular sequence. It would take them about 10 minutes, and they would really have to start with the most basic tumble. And if they did a good one, they could do the next one. And so they just went through all the developmental steps over the course of a couple minutes, from the beginning of tumbling to the movement that they were supposed to be doing in their routine, and or practicing for their new routine, whatever it was. And if they screwed up, he had them go back to a certain point and do a certain number of reps, because he wanted their body to, instead of adapting to this new garbage that it just did, that it wants it to have time to sort of remember what it used to do correctly. And then he would slowly progress them forward. And if there was a certain point they couldn't go past for that day, guess what? They didn't. They might end up doing, front tuck with a half twist instead of, a double full or something. And the and it just because it was worth it for him as a coach to have his athlete learn something that's correct instead of something that's incorrect. Tomorrow's a new day. If I fix the problem today, then chances are good that tomorrow will be better. And so, does that make sense?
I'm slowly getting to a level where, so I've been working out almost for 8 years. I've slowly become getting to a level where I'm doing that myself, which is really hard.
Yeah.
Because I don't have you there saying, don't do that Maltese.
Right.
Yeah. And that's a hard thing. That's a hard thing. But nowadays, when I come in the gym, I actually start off with the most basic exercises. I even sometimes do push-ups on my knees, just to get my shoulders in the right position, and then I move on to wheel push-ups. Then I move on to pseudo planche push-ups, and then I move on to planche push-ups themselves.
How long does that take
I build
you?
So sometimes, some days, I just feel my shoulders are perfect, like moving perfectly, and within like 5 minutes, I can already do like full planche push-ups. Like, holy shit, this feels great. And on some days, on really bad days, it might take 20, 30 minutes, or I might not even do the exercise. I'll be like, today's not a planche day. I'm not gonna planche. I just don't feel like I can planche today safely. So that really depends on the day.
Yeah.
And on average, 15 minutes to 30 minutes. I think so that I can do every exercise.
Right.
Which is
So people don't understand, like, that's not a 15-minute warm-up so much as that's including the moving into the working sets. So where, like, by the end of that 15 minutes, you have done your
by
working
the end of
set.
that, I can basically do a full loaded weighted push up.
Right.
Which depends on, some days it's 80 kilos, some days it's 50 kilos.
Mm-hmm.
So I can right on just put the weight on me, like, without any issues.
Right.
Without feeling any discomfort.
Mm-hmm.
That is what the 15 to 30 minutes does.
Yeah.
And a lot of people in the gym look at me like, damn, this guy's warming up for so long.
Mm-hmm.
But that's just how it is. That's how I just need to get into that mode where everything moves properly. All right, let's move on to the next question before we.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Before we.
No,
get
I love
too
that. I
much
think
into
that it's a
this.
fascinating topic that deserves further examination
Yeah.
later on. Yeah.
Definitely. Jonathan Jessup, he asks, could you recommend safe ways to increase strength and size in the neck? I used to train frequently with a neck harness made by Ironmind, but I stopped because of concerns I have over potential long-term harm that could cause that could cause to the cervical vertebrae.
Okay, so the first thing you want to understand is that the vertebrae are less likely to get damaged than the discs. So that brings us to a central topic in long-term health, which is how to maintain healthy spinal discs. That is an advanced topic because it gets into a lot of research, and there's not just one recommendation you can just take and run with. But if there was one single thing that you would want to remember, it's to work in the middle 60% of your full range of motion. What that means is that the final, like, if you can go all the way from here to neutral to here, and I say that's 100%, this is about 80%. And then this last bit here, I don't want to actually load.
Can you describe that for the audio people?
Yeah, so if you're looking straight forward, and you can, without curling your back at all, put your chin to the chest to where you're basically looking at your ankles, what you really want to do is probably only go to where you're looking at the corner of the floor and the wall. You know what I'm saying? Like, you don't need to use full range of motion in everything. Sometimes that is much more risk than it's worth. And that's especially true for spinal movements. You just don't want to load them up in the very, very end range. And the biggest thing that you don't want to do is you don't want to go from full spinal flexion into any amount of extension. I mean, like, including trying to move back to neutral with high compressive loading. So if it's body weight only, it's still actually a high compressive load, believe it or not. But it's less of an issue than if you're using added weight. So we'll be teaching what that means for different exercises. For neck, what I would say is just like 30 degrees of forward flexion from neutral is plenty. And that's the whole neck. I'm not talking about like one joint. You know, I'm saying if you're looking forward and you go to where you're looking at the corner of the wall and the ground that's like 10 feet in front of you, that's going to be about 30 degrees. And that's going to be just fine. The reality is that your whole torso is going to move, so you're probably going to be looking further down than that, but that's okay too. Just keep in mind, you're kind of using that middle part of the range of motion. And the same thing goes for neck extensions. You don't want to go all the way back as hard as you can, because that's where you can cause vertebral problems as well as disc problems. But the big thing with the neck is compression. It's just not designed for high explosive compressive loading. The bones are very small, they don't have a big surface area, and the discs are relatively weak. So you're really just looking at slow progressive movements there that do not go to end range. You just stay in the middle part and you're fine. Does that make sense?
Basically,
if you
limit your range of motion and slowly progress.
Yeah, if you extend your neck as far back as you can, that's 100% extension.
Okay.
And then come back to neutral. Only use 70 to 80% of that. Avoid the last 20, 30%. You're going to avoid the vast majority of the risk. Same thing with forward. From all the way forward, come back up to neutral and only use the first like 70% from neutral down, right? And it's same thing. You're going to avoid almost all the risk. And then just like everything else, when you're looking for strength and growth over time, volume before load. Right? These are
Alrighty.
Yeah, these are also postural muscles. They are inherently going to be more slow twitch. They are going to respond better to higher volume.
All right, you heard it, Jonathan.
Yeah.
I hope we.
I used to love the
answered
neck
your-
machines. I mean, I've used the harnesses. My favorite was the Nautilus 4-way neck. I mean, I used to do 20, 30 reps every single day of training with, I think it was, I built up to 120 pounds, and it was a true 120. This is one of the old machines for it just was what it was. And I started with, I think, 15. And that was all I could handle. And then just over the course of a year, for whatever reason, my body let me do that. Just like at the end of that year, I was shrugging 5 plates for the same 30 reps. Dang. Yeah. I mean, so I had strong grip just because I was on my bike all the time, jumping up into semis. And,
Makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was just my body allowed me to make that rate of progress safely without any issues. We were very conservative. There was more weight on the machine. We did not go past 120 pounds. Totally arbitrary. We just didn't. And I probably used slightly less range of motion, but very close than what I just described. So, I mean, you just do what feels safe, in other words, right? And if you're ever concerned, do slightly less, not slightly more. That's it.
All right, moving on to the next question by Christopher Nowak. I can answer this question real fast. He asks, do you plan on providing any nutritional guidance for fat loss or muscle gain? Yes, it's actually one of the first articles. So, and then we're more
starting with the
articles
basics.
coming on that soon.
Exactly. With pretty much every area that we cover, which is going to be more or less everything eventually. We start from the surface and work our way down. So we want you to have the most important takeaways. You may not understand them right away, but that's all right. We'll build the understanding and we'll build more nuance as time goes on. Yeah.
Next question by Gregor Bear.
Mm-hmm.
He asks, I was wondering why there's such a big discrepancy between bodybuilding and bodyweight fitness in terms of research or scientific information. When I'm thinking of science-based approach, I think of people like Brad Schoenfeld, Mike Israetel, or Eric Helms.
Right.
Helms. But in bodyweight fitness, I can think of none.
Yeah, so when it comes to the discrepancy between body weight and powerlifting, Olympic lifting, weights in general, so the reason for it is that it's just so much easier to get people to do weights and you can control all the variables, so it makes for better research. But you need to understand that, if you take the time and you listen to everything that all these really good people say, because I think all 3 of those people should be really 3 of the top 5 people that you're listening to for fitness information. I think that you have to remember that they all, because it's true, will say something along the lines of, it doesn't matter how you work your body as long as the muscles are working. It's all about what percentage of their maximum they're working and how long they are given to rest and how close to failure you come and what you're feeding them. The work that you do doesn't matter. The intensity of the work matters. Your muscles can't tell the difference. And so all of the research that deals with high leverage strength training applies to body weight, high leverage positions. Exactly the same. So, when it comes to programming and when it comes to nutrition and when it comes to all of those things, for some reason that's just hasn't been obvious to people. And hopefully will be a part of continuing to make that more and more obvious, is that good training is good training no matter what you're using for resistance. The only thing that becomes a little bit different are high shear positions. And you'll actually see the same thing, like when people do bent over rows and stiff leg deadlifts and things like that, where there are, by nature, higher shear positions. They tend to stay further away from failure, and they tend to take weight increases a bit slower because there is an increased risk for injury. And we'll talk in a later time about how that relates to straight arm work. But the bottom line is that for a very long time, somebody who is getting started with straight arm work is really kind of performing maintenance and upgrades. You know what I'm saying? They're not ready for full performance. It's like you have a car with a 400 horsepower engine.
It's always a car.
Cars are easy, you know. You may have a 400 may have a 400 horsepower engine, but if you've got like 1-inch axles, you probably shouldn't be trying to drift on it, because they'll break. If you have undersized bolts, you'll break. Your wheels will fly off. And so you have to have the right connection pieces. And you can't just go to the shop and exchange yours out for new ones like you can for a car. You have to earn it the slow way, which means doing exercise, letting your body recover, not doing so much that you're stuck in the in the cycle of injury and recovery, maintenance, and then injury again. You have to stay over on the safe side, but in the growth zone. And that's something that we'll be working very hard to make super easy.
Moving on to the next question. This is a question for me. Yay. By Jason Richer. He asks, Yacht, what are the top 3 things you have learned by training under Joshua? Okay. What are the top 3 things? Okay, so you have to remember, before I trained with Josh, I basically did a random stuff. Like I did a G2G kind of approach to everything in training, and it worked for a while, but then I plateaued. I got sad because I want to get stronger. And Josh basically taught me how to program. I think that's one of the most important things. He taught me how to program, and he taught me how to go about skills from a technical perspective, from a biomechanical perspective. Because we like, for example, let's take the planche, for example. I always thought, you gotta have a super round upper back, and that what is it called again? Thoracic kyphosis, but then like
extreme.
Next level,
mm-hmm.
Extreme. Like you can look up my old posts of gymnastic bodies, and you can see how.
Oh, look, we were
I was like cat.
There was a point in time where the entire internet was drinking that Kool-Aid, and it wasn't the best Kool-Aid.
Yeah, but basically you taught me something. He taught me how to go about the spine basically in every movement. So that was one of the most important things I've learned. And the third thing is patience. I think you taught me how to be patient, bro. I think it was either
that was our biggest struggle.
Yeah, it was either you or it was just me getting injured so much that life taught me that. I don't know.
So I don't know if you
it's
remember.
Either life or you.
So a couple of years ago, you had just, I can't remember if you were 18 yet or if you had just turned 18. We had spent 4 years where we talked a couple times a year, and you would ask something, and I would really break things down, and I would say exactly kind of where you had made mistakes, why you got hurt, and what you need to do now. And basically all of it was disregarded, and you would which is normal, by the way. I mean, like, this is what it means to be young. It's very rare to find anybody, talented or not, who is willing to take things systematically when they're young.
Makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Just because it's boring. It's not.
I never took anything systematically.
It's not as exciting
to my life. It's very boring.
Kind of,
but it's
until you get over this hump, where what you realize is that I know what to expect now. I know what's coming. My goal today is my reality in 4 months. And that gives a kind of satisfaction that most people don't know what to do with, because most people, it's especially now, it's worse than ever, is that they, it's click, point, post something, instant response, everything's quick. So we're used to this rapid turnaround. And very few people, I would say nobody, has built their own furniture, right? I mean, there's obviously people out there, but effectively speaking, how many people have even refinished something, stripped the paint off and painted it new? You're going to look at that chair that jewelry box completely differently than anything you ever buy in the store. You are going to take care of that without meaning to better. You are going to use it more because that's a piece of your life. It is something that you created and it's missing. And so it's because it's not really around, it's not something that we tend to do. It's not a habit people have. It has become a missing value in general. And it was never good with young people in general, but now there's not even any basic training on it. And so it's hard to ask somebody to come from that kind of a lifestyle and then be disciplined. You know, it's very difficult. And so that was a big challenge. And because you would talk about like, oh, you know, I want to accomplish this and that and whatever. And then it got to a point where I think we hadn't talked. I mean, I was done. And then, you know, you wrote me and you're like, look, you know, I know, like, and blah, blah, blah. And I basically wrote it off. I was very nice about it, but I was also very honest. And I said, here's the thing. I've put probably 40 or 50 hours at least into just our private correspondences. Forget the public ones. And you haven't done anything with it. And it's like you're a good guy. I like you, but I'm not getting anything back on my personal investment in you in that time. And so I'm not going to spend it because it's something that somebody else could benefit from if I gave it to them, and they'll do something instead of nothing. And, you know, I don't know what that, you know, triggered in you, but there was a change. And, you know, we started moving forward, and you said, I will do things. Even if it drives me bananas, I will do it. And so we got systematic, and that's where everything changed.
It happened twice.
Yeah.
So the first one was, I remember the second one better than the first one, but the first one was, you finally gave me like a full-on routine, and just having that, and I had friends who were doing the same routine with me, and we were all growing so fast. That was enough for me. That I finally was like, you know what, this guy knows what he's talking about. I did everything by the word, and then I finally went to my first skill cycle, and I did my first full planche after 6 years of training, guys. I got very emotional when I did that.
Well, keep in mind, how long had you been on the new program?
1 year, I think.
Yeah, almost to the day.
Yeah, I think 1 year, and then I finally got to my first skill cycle, and then after like a few weeks, boom, full planche, and then that was really weird to me because that was the one movement. See, it was the one thing I could never achieve in life. It was like full planche. Why can't I get you? And I finally did, and then I spammed it, and then I got injured, and that was when the second moment happened, when I got very disciplined. It was like, okay, I got the full planche. I know I can get it now. I've had it before. It's fine. I'm injured now. Next time, just gonna follow the program and just gonna do whatever, because I'll get whatever I want. And then like a year after that, 1.5 years later, after my tendonitis, Maltesers, Victorians, crosses, basically everything I've dreamed of, I can do it now, and now I have to dream bigger. now I have to think about movements I've never even thought about, and it's really cool. It's really cool being in this position. Now it's just basically learning von Gelders, some weird Victorian movements where I go from front lever to Victorian, doing some basic transitions, learning to go from iron cross to Maltese, iron cross to Victorian. Just saying that sounds so crazy. So that's cool.
It is.
It is really cool. So yeah, and now I just gotta get bigger. So for the people wondering what's happening right now, I'm gonna get bigger, and then in a few months, I think February is probably good, I'll do another skill cycle, and that's when the real stuff goes down. Really crazy stuff is gonna happen.
When do you think? When do you think you like really bought into the idea that you just weren't eating enough?
1.5 years ago, 2 years ago.
Can you tell people what made it hard to go from really like getting that and understanding that to making the change? Because
it is one of the hardest things. First off, when you're living at home, it's hard to decide what you're eating. So getting supplements helped a lot. And then what changed my mind basically was I would weight myself every day, and I would also write down my workouts, schedules, and everything. I would log everything. I could just see I was lifting way more when I was eating way more, and seeing the weight scale go from like 58 kilo to 59 to 60, and then seeing your body change, that was extremely motivating. And as soon as you hop onto that train, you will not stop. However, a big problem is whenever I get injured or whenever I'm unable to do a certain amount of volume, I tend to stop eating again. And it's because in my mind I'm like, well, you haven't put in the work, so where's this food going? Huh?
yeah, you have to reduce a little bit, but you still have to
you
you
still
have
have
to
to
support your
eat.
body.
Yeah. So you still got to keep eating,
Mm-hmm.
which I'm doing now. So I'm just eating a lot. I'm 64 kilos right now. I gained from 60. I went from 60 to 64, and I used to be a year ago. I used to also be 64. But looking at the pictures now, my arms are way
You're
bigger.
totally different because you're still ripped now.
My arms. I'm still relatively ripped.
Yeah. That's what people don't get is like, if you don't give yourself the chance to grow, you can waste 3 years easily on what should be achievable in 1 year. And that's not
it's a
just weight
waste.
gain. That's literally like having the composition you want at an increased body weight. I mean, it's just it's amazing how many people think that these like slow, lean bulks are the way to go because they're not.
It's also hard to maintain slow lean bulks.
You have to be
Just
very
eat.
obsessive.
Yeah,
It's not
so
good. It's not good mentally.
I don't count my
For
calories.
most
I just eat. I check the weight scale in the morning consistently at the very same time in the same circumstances. I try to keep it all very the same, and I just look at the number, and then I keep monitoring that and see if it goes up. If it doesn't, I'll just eat more.
Yep.
So I don't even calculate anything. I just eat more then.
Well, we know what Yad needs to hit. We know that he needs somewhere around 3,500 calories a day, which is a lot of food, especially when you are 64 kilos. That's a hell of a lot of food.
It's hard for me to eat that much at once, so I have to. I have a lot of meals on a day.
Yeah,
5 to 6 meals, if I do it well.
Yeah, and that's that's the nature of getting bigger your job.
It's fun though.
It is. It's a lot of fun, and it's also nice when it's when you get a break from it. When you do it for a couple of months, you make some really noticeable great gains, and then you say, okay, now all I'm going to worry about is getting a little bit more protein and dropping some of this fat off, and because it takes your food burden way down.
Yeah,
it gives
and
you
it's
a break.
so chill.
Mm-hmm.
See, I'm one of those people who actually enjoys a cup more than a bulk, because
it makes no sense to me, but all right.
It makes no sense because
No.
to you it doesn't make sense. Some people understand what I mean, but
No,
it's
I do.
So I eat because I know I need to eat. I don't eat because I have to eat. I have to. I mean that's not what I mean, but I don't. I eat because I know. Oh shit! I have to eat now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people who have started from a higher body fat. So people who start essentially from being fat to getting strong react differently to a bulk or cut than people who are skinny and then become big.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that's consistent, but I've just noticed skinny people who get into fitness, they tend to do well. They tend to enjoy a cup more than a bulk.
I think it's a mental thing.
I think so too, but
because there's also a lot of, you actually run into a huge problem with people who lose a lot of weight and they're terrified of regaining their fat, and so they really have this issue that they're unable to get back into a healthy cycle, and they just stay calorie restricted. And at another time, we'll talk about why that's such a mistake, but also why it's so easy to fall into and kind of what it does. So that's it's a tricky thing, and people just don't have good guidance. in most
For
places.
me, it's more a practical thing. Eating 5 meals is just not very practical in life.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the
Whereas-
things that's hard to make gains right now is that even on outpatient, like, you know how much time I get to eat a day? Like none. So, yeah, I mean,
Dude, infuse.
dude, wish. I mean, I have shakes, I have protein bars, and I rarely get to have a real meal. That's for off days. And so trying to make really meaningful gains right now is just a mistake. It's going to be...
How much?
Yeah.
How much do you enjoy real meals nowadays?
Oh, man, they're
Like
fantastic. Yeah.
Right? They're like the
They're the
highlight
best.
of your week now.
Oh, dude, it's like the smell of food is in the air, and I mean, you hear things in the pan sizzling, and it's just
'Cause
like, oh, this sounds so different than a plastic wrapper.
Yeah, because I remember having a lot of my calories coming from shakes.
Yeah,
And
and it doesn't
I
feel as good
remember-
to get them from shakes.
No, it does
You
not.
know, it's a great way to
weird.
save money on whole food protein. You know, so you get like you eat the food that you want, and you know when you need extra, get the rest of the protein from a powder. It's cheap, it's easy, it doesn't spoil, it doesn't really spill. If it does spill, you can sweep it back up. You know, it's just all around has a lot of advantages. But like the nothing makes you feel as good as legit solid calories. Like when
Yeah.
they're sitting in your stomach. And when you haven't eaten so much that you just feel tired, but you're satisfied, calms you down, you know, because stomach distension is actually a vagal stimulator. So there's a lot of things that are happening during it. And the bottom line is that it's the bomb, man. It's where it's at.
All I know is downstairs there's spaghetti waiting for me, and I cannot wait now to get downstairs and put that in my mouth and just eat it.
Yeah.
I just wanna. So let's go to the last question.
Okay.
So that I can go and eat in bulk. The last question is from Damani Turner. He asks, many moons ago, I came across this forum post, and it's about your post nutrition 2013
Yeah.
on gymnastic bodies.
So
And he says, wait, let me finish the question. He understands that this. Okay, I understand that this was primarily geared towards gymnasts and bodyweight fitness practitioners, but is it also applicable to someone who primarily focuses on strength training and powerlifting? Is the information Joshua provided still relevant 5 years ago, or has research made strides that would call for an update? Looking back now, is there anything Joshua would change about what he wrote with the knowledge and experience he's gained since then, especially after finishing medical school? Take the stage.
absolutely. Medical school has a lot less to do with it than substantial advances in research on peri-workout carbohydrates. That's really where the changes are. That's really the bottom line, is that, yes, there's going to be a substantially different and better approach to things. We'll talk about why certain things that I did worked, and they are not the reasons that I thought they were in 2013. And that's because we were missing information at that time. The research had not been done. There were active discussions. Certain things made a lot of sense. And then we find out that it's just not what we thought it was. And that's a very important part of staying up to date. You know, you have to be skeptical, and you have to be open to being wrong. Like, it's not bad to be wrong. It's bad to stay wrong.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know what I'm saying? And that's why you also want to be careful about the way you frame things. Like, if I wrote that again, I would do it differently, you know, even as speculative stuff. But the protein recommendations really haven't changed. If anything, we've just reinforced over and over and over again that we've already basically figured protein out. There's really not anything else to be gained there from a performance perspective.
One of the things that I saw in his question is that he asks whether you can also use this information for powerlifting. And like we said again, there's no big difference in like
Right. But I would disregard what I wrote in that article completely, and I would wait for the new stuff, because you do
The new
not
stuff
want
is
to try
coming.
and drink that much while you are doing squats or deadlifts because you will throw up all over yourself. It'd be terrible. I mean, not everybody will, but people get a little too literal on things. And so if you live and die by the words in that article, I think you'd be very uncomfortable. There's easier ways.
Yeah, because there's a lot of water. I remember there's a lot of water in there.
It's more important during the summer when you're sweating, especially if you're outside. And you got to remember, too, that article was written at a time when people were doing long workouts with relatively short rest times. And so they're generating more heat and they were losing more water. But I will also say that I think that, and I told people in the comments there, like, look, if you are doing things and you're finding it's too much water, just use less water. Like, don't be crazy and just say, my God, I've got to make this work. Make modification. Like, not everybody's the same. I personally thrived on exactly what I wrote. But I'm big. I produce a lot of heat. I was a very efficient sweater. So I lost a lot of water during workouts. It's actually an adaptation to exercise that you sweat more easily. And because the water evaporation is what cools you off. So if you take longer to sweat, you can overheat to critical levels. Yeah, it's not good. So you actually fatigue sooner. And so, it's this balance. So it's a great question. I think that it's one of those things where when you read something about nutrition, if it's more than a year old, you should really be rechecking the research. Things do change pretty rapidly. There are certain areas that won't change. Areas that won't change are going to be protein recommendations for during a caloric surplus. The only things that would make it change would be specific research on bodybuilders and the unlimited weight classes, the people who can be as big as they want to be. Those are the places where you will probably see the biggest change.
Okay.
And it won't be a big change. It'll literally be like, hey, guess what? You probably cap out from benefits at something more like 2.2 grams per kilo, as opposed to like 1.7, 1.8. Not a big difference. So those are really the only things that'll change for gains there. People probably still think BCAAs are a great use of their money. They're not. They're garbage. We'll talk about that.
Thank God.
No, they're worthless. They're also gross.
I have a lot of supplements, and
BCAAs are trash. They're literally the worst. They're one of the worst things that you could spend your money on trying to get BCAAs is actual BCAAs. You will always do better with whole protein, no matter what you're trying to do. And the funny thing is that if you're diabetic, you should really avoid BCAAs. And we'll talk about that in the future. But it's a fun search to do.
All right. Let's wrap this up, man. I'm hungry.
Yeah. Spaghetti. I've actually got to take off in about 15 minutes and go pick Morgan up. So.
All right, cool.
Yeah.
Well, guys, thank you for tuning in the second podcast. Thank you for your questions. And I think we're done. Josh, give us a good goodbye again, and then I'll give my goodbye.
Thanks again for tuning in. Appreciate you being here. And I know there's a million more questions out there, so send them in. We'll tackle them.
That was a good
Or
wrap
treat them
up.
gently.
Right.
Depends on the question.
All right. Later, guys.
Later.